Advise me that we have quorum, so I'd like to now call our meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. Today's meeting is being held by video conference and in person at City Hall Committee Room number 2. The meeting is also being live streamed online at youtube.com/Toronto City Council Live. Although we may be meeting in different locations today, the committee would like to acknowledge that the land we are meeting on is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. If you're registered to speak at today's meeting, please listen for me to call your name. I will call speakers in the order that they appear on the list. The list of speakers can be viewed online by visiting the Service Excellence Committee page at toronto.ca/council and clicking the speakers box for today's meeting. Members, the City Clerk has provided all agenda materials on toronto.ca/council and on CMP, the Clerk's meeting portal. I also want to remind you to please submit and approve your motions by email. Staff are available at svex@toronto.ca to help with motions. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? If you do have an interest, please raise your hand and unmute your mic. Seeing none, we will proceed. May I have a motion to confirm the minutes from our last meeting on September 6, 2024? Councillor Ainsley moves. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. And we can now begin our agenda. Our first item is SE 6.1, 311 Toronto Framework for Reporting and Dashboards Update. We do have a speaker. Our second item is SE 6.2, Exploring Enhanced Service Partnership Opportunities for Parking Infraction Reporting between Customer Experience Division and Toronto Police Service. And that will be held for a presentation. SE 6.3 is Listening to Toronto Survey. That will be held for a speaker. And we have a presentation. Thank you. SE 6.4 is Parks, Forestry and Recreation, Urban Forestry, Service Standards for Tree Maintenance and Planting Requests presentation. That will be held for a presentation. The next item is SE 6.5, Transportation Services Service Excellence. That will be held for a presentation. And Mr. Clerk, I think we have a new item. And if you can just advise me or put the motion up or whatever is required to add new, just a motion to add new business. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, what is the new business?
Do we have a title?
We have nothing.
Yeah, it's, do we have a title? Sorry, I don't have a live view in front of me just to see if it's up.
I don't have anything on the screen.
Yeah.
Just stand by. The clerk's just getting to it. It's a briefing note from staff, which is a referral from SE 5.2. It's a matter that we covered on the previous meeting. I'm just getting handed a copy of it. This is from MLS. And it is a briefing note for members of council reviewing MLS and 311 customer service delivery process. And it goes back to the previous meeting, 5.2. Councillor Perks.
Mr. Chair? Yes. Sorry to be troublesome. I don't have anything. I've been trying to look on CMP and stuff, and I just can't find any reference.
We'll just find out where it's at.
Just if I could finish. If it's a briefing for members of council, I don't understand why it has to come to committee. Is it simply just sent around to members of council?
Just bear with me for a second. I'll get some advice from the clerk.
Thank you.
Sorry, members, I'll just need one more second here just to confirm. So members, the clerk's advised it's a briefing note from staff. There was an indication there was a desire to post it to the committee's agenda so that it was available to all members of council and to the public. An alternate would be to simply just circulate it to members of council, but they have advised that this is an orderly way to accept the briefing note because it refers back to one of the previous items. There's no action. It will be us receiving the report for information, and it has to be accepted by the committee in order to be posted for you to see it.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll add that item to the agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried, and the clerks will be able to put that up live, and we'll all have access to the information. Thank you. Okay, so back up to the top of the agenda. We are at SE 6.1, which is the Toronto Framework for Reporting and Dashboards update. All right, our first speaker is Ingrid Boudet. Do we have, Ingrid's here. Welcome back to the Service Excellence Committee. We'll give you a moment to plug in the laptop, and as soon as you're ready to begin, please go right ahead. You have 5 minutes.
Quite well. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. My name is Ingrid Boudet, and I'm founder of No More Noise Toronto. We are a grassroots organization that is focusing on noises that wake us up, keep us up, and disturb us day and night. We take a data and process-oriented approach to our activism and advocacy, and we are thankful to be collaborating with city divisions and councillors to reduce noise pollution. We have almost 1,600 subscribers to our noise news and the support of Forestry and Fontra, the Federation of North and South Toronto Residents Associations. So lots of people are impacted by noise. And 311, basically, you guys are the front door to the city, and I'm really thankful for this committee where we are looking at how to make these processes better. This is where most people have most of their interactions with the city. You are the data collector and keeper of all who visit, and you're the first step in protecting our health when it comes to noise. So I was really thankful to read the report, and I know there was a lot of talk about Salesforce, but here you're looking at business intelligence, an in-house system that's already here for your data consolidation, analysis, and reporting. And the fact that it's already integrated with key systems is great. I just want to make sure that as it captures data for MLS, that also includes noise and animal services. And I also want to make sure that this also connects with the great motion from Councillor Ainsley in September about increased transparency regarding noise reporting. There's a table that's out on the Open Data Portal, but it's a table, and it's frankly, it's not very helpful. So please make maps and visualize the complaints with a map by type. And I'm wondering if these dashboards that are going to be created for city councillors will be also available then for the public. So I'm imploring you to fix the intake for the noise reporting process. For motor vehicle noise, it's completely broken. And I'm going to build another workflow for amplified sound because it's problematic, I think, for both MLS and people. The user interface on the cell phone is terrible. It's almost like it was designed that somebody could walk somebody else through it. People give up. And as long as you have this as your processes, you won't have accurate data, because people, frankly, they give up in trying to report noise, especially moving vehicles, but also amplified sound. So why people are unsatisfied, they just feel that there's no immediate action, it's difficult, the information that is required they do not have, there's delays. If there's noise at 1 o'clock on a Thursday morning, it takes a while for MLS to come back, and often they're only available until 2 in the afternoon or 2 in the morning, and noise exemptions are allowed until 4. So there's just some fixes that need to happen here. So I'm hoping that we can look at talking about separating the noise workflow from the others. A lot of the other things that municipal bylaws has to enforce are stationary. Garbage cans and Christmas trees don't move, but noise absolutely does, and it shuts on and off. So I think amplified sound and moving vehicles needs to be separated out, and also maybe a review of the priority action response when it comes to noise. Because when people are being impacted by noise, it is an overwhelming response, and it impacts our health, it impacts our mental health and our physical health, myself included. So I think we've made great progress in collecting all noise reports at all times. We can now report leaf blowers during the day, which is awesome. Noise is the most complex for MLS to enforce, so I'm hoping that some of my suggestions help them. And I ask you to work with the members of the public and No More Noise to find solutions, involve us in user testing. And finally, reduce the number of noise reports. I think that would help everyone, and that can be achieved in a number of ways. We can do area sound level monitoring, where it's not up to the person who is impacted by amplified sound. It is just simply something that's monitored on the streets and reported back to MLS through dashboards. So I recommend that there's also some technology investment. So finally, managing noise, it supports Toronto public health, it supports Transform TO, it supports Cafe TO, the night economy, the statement of commitment to accessibility. If you are blind, the noise in our city is extremely difficult to navigate. And the Streetscape Improvement Program and many others. Noise touches many different aspects of how to make a good city. So finally, let's create a better Toronto by reducing noise. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the speaker? Just give me a moment for the screen to turn over. I'll just check with my colleagues again because I can see you now. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, thank you for joining us.
Oh,
Thank you.
sorry, I have a question.
Councillor Cheng, if I can get you to put on your camera would be great because I
My
can't see
camera
you, but
is
go
on.
ahead.
That's very strange. My camera's on and I can see it on my WebEx, but not sure what's happening. So I just want to thank Ms. Boudet for coming and being a passionate advocate for our city. I wonder if you could speak just more about the collect all noise reports all the time is one of your suggestions.
Yeah, you need to have a complete data set to understand trends and what has happened in the past and how that is changing. And I know that there's another agenda item called Listening to Toronto, and that's about collecting baseline measurements. And so this is where, for example, leaf blowers have been annoying people for a long time, but they weren't able to report it during the day. And so that's where, through advocacy and other people speaking up, we are now able to collect those data points so that we can understand what it is today, and then is it getting worse or not? Frankly, because people are now working from home more, I think they were at the office when the leaf blowers all came by en masse, and now they're home. And so this is making for a different work environment and also a different home environment, and it's impacting people that way. There's other non-enforceable events that I think we need to also collect the data on. Otherwise, we won't know if it's getting worse or getting better.
Mm-hmm. In my ward, there's a noise that's being emitted by some machinery on top of a condo. And there have been people who have tried to report it, but because it's under investigation and in I guess in the summer it was deemed didn't meet a threshold, so they stopped accepting reports about it. So would that be a situation that you think would apply to the suggestion that they shouldn't just shut down the reporting if people still find it is bothersome and affecting their sleep, that they should still be allowed to register that complaint?
Thank you for that question. And yes, I do. It's if something has been, if something is undergoing investigation and if people are still being impacted by it, how will we know if the service level standards are being met? How will we know if there's been any improvement? How will residents learn to trust the city if the city isn't listening? And so that's one of my biggest things is when I ask people, why haven't you done noise reports or what have been the complications? It's that there is no response, is that the reports can fall into a vacuum and they don't have proper closure. And so they feel that they're not being heard. And so not being able to make a noise report is then not being heard, basically. So I do think that, especially in those extenuating circumstances, like what you have in your ward, that should be kept open, and then people can, and that's where sound level monitoring could help, because if that is just passively in the area, then MLS can look and go, oh, well, here's when somebody called in. What do the sound level measurements say? And measure in dBA and dBc, because often it shows up in dBc, but it doesn't show up in dBA.
Thank you. Also, we know that one of the complexities of noise enforcement is between police and MLS. Because of that jurisdictional, police cannot stop moving vehicles, but often the noisy cars are moving, so MLS doesn't respond to those. So I wonder, we have something about the coordination between parking in terms of police. Do you think that there's a method that we could strengthen how the two divisions work together on noise enforcement?
I'm really looking forward to that presentation, because when I saw that agenda item, I was curious about how that's going to be. And I think that that's what we need to do, is we need to collaborate and work together across these divisions. I know that this is also one of the other things. We're collecting all noise reports all the time. MLS opened up that you can now report a moving vehicle. And so there is a drop-down menu for that. But how does that information get transferred to the police? How often? How frequently? How does that process work? And I'm unclear on that. So I just think that there needs to be more collaboration, absolutely. And what that looks like, we can determine together. But we need to, moving vehicles is my members' #1 complaint. It hits everybody, it's transient and really hard to enforce. And so again, that's where I think technology is something that can help us all.
Great, thank you so much for answering my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Cheng.
Thanks, Councillor Cheng. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Councillor Cheng, I'll let you know your camera's working now. There's a little bit of a time delay from one screen to the other, so thank you for speaking up, and I'll let my colleagues know if I need to catch my attention. Don't be shy, because I won't always be able to see you because of the screen. Okay, that was our one speaker, correct, Mr. Clerk? All right, so the questions of staff. Seeing none, I will ask one briefly. I don't think it's a very long set of questions. Time myself. So the heart of the report talks a little bit about the service dashboard that we have as councillors. And I wondered if you could just comment a little bit about where the information comes from and what kind of information we see, because I'm pretty sure that, although we're very lucky to have some of these business intelligence reporting tools, we don't have all of the view that a staff member of the Toronto Public Service would have, and in particular in the divisions. And I wondered if you could confirm that, and for those members of the public listening, so they understand what's at the heart of the information that we have reference to in this report.
Through the chair. So the data is a combination of information coming from our 311 system, as well as our back-end systems that are used by the divisions, really focused around the service requests and how we provide like the service levels around those. So For the most part, the data is available to you. If there's anything that's missing, then we'd work with the councillor offices to understand what additional information would be needed.
Thank you. And just in terms of the tool itself, does 311 have some flexibility to rethink or reinvent how the information is presented so that we can think through the work that we do as councillors? And, you know, it always takes time and effort to make new reports and so on, but there is some flexibility. This is not set in stone the way that it presents the information to us.
Yes, through the chair, absolutely. We do have that ability. And as we start to roll out and we work with the councillor offices to deploy the use of BI, we will be collecting that feedback, councillor, and can use that feedback to make enhancements as we move forward.
So you're okay if I ask you for that?
Yes, well, we need to work with you depending on what you ask for.
All right, and the final one is, how fresh is the information? Are we looking back last year, or do we have a fairly intuitive or fresh view into what's happening at Customer Experience Division?
So the data's refreshed quite frequently. We can get the exact details of that, but we do go back several years, and we do collect on a regular basis at regular intervals.
I guess the point I'm making, it's fresh enough that we can see evolving trends. You know, as we move into fall and into winter, the type of things that interest people change, and we can see that, I think, is what I can see through this tool, right?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Great, thank you. Those were all my questions. Did any other members have a question?
Yeah, I have questions, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Ainsley, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering, has the dashboards, have they been presented to councillors' constituency office staff for their perspective on them?
So through the chair, not all offices. There are currently about 9 that do have access to the existing BI reports. But as we start to roll out, that is some of the feedback. We will work with the councillor offices to do that.
Okay, but are they seeing them, like, for example, my constituency office staff, are they seeing them before this rolls out for their perspective, if there's anything that they see that could be better or work better from their perspective? I think they're the ones that'll be using it the most.
Through the chair, yes. And again, for those offices that do already have access, they would be able to provide that feedback to us now. For any offices that do not have access, as we roll this out, there will absolutely be that opportunity to provide us feedback.
Okay, but this wasn't done ahead of time?
No, not directly.
Okay, all right. And then the other, Mr. Chair, the other outstanding issue around these dashboards, we're still waiting on, I guess, Park, Forestry, and Recreation to be connected into the 311 system properly, it's my understanding.
Go ahead.
Through the chair, that is correct. We are currently working on that integration with Parks.
Okay, and what's the timeline on that?
So through the chair, still to be confirmed, but we are looking at sometime within the next, I would say between Q2 and Q3 of 2025.
Okay. And then for complaints for, I'll say, graffiti or issues with utility boxes that are outside of the realm of the City of Toronto, for example, Bell or Rogers, does that get captured in these dashboards?
Through the chair, not at the moment. We do not have information around external assets.
Sorry, who doesn't have the 311 doesn't have the information, or?
So while we may collect a service request, I believe what's missing is the information that this particular box belongs to an external company.
Okay, isn't that something we should be capturing, because it does take up, you know, I know my staff, for example, spend quite a bit of time trying to figure out if there's graffiti on utility boxes, whether that's a City or a Rogers or a Bell or whoever. And, you know, I thought the concept behind these dashboards was also to figure out, you know, how much time different things are taking up for our staff to complete.
Through the chair, so yes, we can collect that information, but Councillor, I think we need to understand what we would do with that information, how we report it back. So that is something that we can take back.
Okay, do you need a motion for that, or
One's coming.
we just give it to you as direction?
Through the chair, I would say no, we can take that back and work with the councillor's office to make sure that we're providing you with the information that you're looking for. But
Okay, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Ainsley. I am going to bring a motion just about enhancement. So I think the staff are nodding that they've taken the feedback as well here. With that, are there any other questions? Seeing none, members wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll speak very
All right,
briefly.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councillor Ainsley.
Yeah, I'll just quite briefly, I just want to thank for all of the staff for the work on the dashboards. It's something that's been a long time coming. Based on my earlier comments, I would like to ensure that our constituency offices do have the opportunity to provide input on any enhancements, because I think our constituency staff are the ones that are going to be the most active or involved in using these dashboards. And I'm still a little frustrated, Parks, Forestry, and Recreation. When I'm out and about my ward, we're still operating on 2 tiers of 311. And then, if you send somebody if somebody goes into a park and they have an issue with a playground, equipment being broken, picnic tables or park benches damaged, there's no real opportunity within the 311 system to get these issues addressed. And often I hear from residents, we tell them to be using 311, and then they go into a park and they have those issues. So, I know staff have goals to get the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation into 311, but, I hope that's being advanced as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Any other councillors wishing to speak? Seeing none, I'll speak very briefly. Mr. Clerk, could you show the motion that I have? Members, it's a very simple motion I'm placing. It's just asking the Customer Experience Division to look at extending access and training to all of the offices of the mayor and councillors for the business intelligence tool, and to talk to the offices about modifications and enhancements, presumably after they had a chance to use it a little bit, and then let us know how it's going in 2025. And members, I just very briefly comment, I thank very much the Toronto Public Service and all those that contribute to the business intelligence tool. We don't, as councillors, have the same view into the inner workings of the 311 supporting system as a member of staff does. And I understand that. We are here to make council decisions. We are here to help with service issues with our constituents. But having tools like this do offer us really good insights. And I'm looking at a live view of it right now on my screen in front of me because I can. And it tells me right now in Toronto that the number one service request is property standards. Follow very closely. It should be no surprise about repairing or replacing residential garbage bin lids. And then the third, again, should not be a surprise, and that is dealing with wildlife cadavers on the road. And that's because we're in the fall season. And I know that these top service requests move around throughout the year because of the seasonality of these type of occurrences. But there's lots of other views, and you can look at things at a citywide view or an area-specific view, and you can see how things change. You can see where the workload goes, and I find that personally very, very helpful. And I think this is an incredible tool to help us as councillors. So I do want to express my appreciation to the team that puts this together every day. The data is quite fresh and quite valuable, and I encourage all members of council to make use of these tools, including the constituency office staff as well. So hopefully my motion is helpful and constructive. I know they're working on it anyways, but I wanted to underscore that and put that before you as a committee. So on that, are there any other speakers? Seeing none, all those in favor of the amendment? That carries. Clerk advises that it's item as amended. All those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. We will go now to the second item, which is SE 6.2, exploring enhanced service partnership opportunities for parking infraction reporting between Customer Service Experience Division and Toronto Police Service. And we have a presentation today. We have guests to the committee from the Toronto Police Service. Welcome to the committee.
Honored Chair, thank you for having us. We just wanted to take an opportunity to present what we're working through for online reporting of parking complaints, where we're at right now, and where we're going as a Toronto Police Service. So as a quick introduction, last June, we launched the first phase of our online reporting and platform transformation, the goal of which is to improve the user experience, the user interface, and look at it as a service rather than as an individual piece of technology, which helps us report online, streamline information, and reduce calls ultimately to non-emergency phone numbers. It's really working through diverting services online where possible for non-emergency calls, specifically parking complaints. So what that first phase currently looks like, or our second phase actually, is by highlighting a guided user entry. So letting a user see where they're at in a process when they're submitting a parking complaint, having an intuitive address entry, so emulating experiences that someone would see from perhaps Canada Post or Amazon, so building that familiarity and consistency across applications, keeping reports in very plain language, so previous iterations of our parking complaints application had very technical Toronto Police language. We tried to make that language more simpler, easier to understand, and being able to direct people if they don't live in Toronto and would like to report a parking complaint, where can they go? So a better customer service overall in the reporting. And then in the notification space, being able to add multiple email addresses or multiple phone numbers so that more than one person could receive an email address. So for example, if you are working at a condominium and you are a security guard and it's the end of your shift, being able to provide an email address for the person who would be filling in for you. We also have a mobile responsive and accessible design and opt-in notifications. Once you've filed your complaint, what we've also introduced, and this is new, viewing your complaint online. So once it's submitted online, being able to enter your event number, so your reference number, and your primary email address, and being able to view all of the information that you've submitted. The screen on the right shows an example of that. Also with a status update. Is this complaint active? Has it been resolved? So you know exactly where your complaint is. An event number for reference in case you did need to call or receive follow-up, and then the details of your complaint. So what that looks like and what we've seen in the year following the release compared to the year previous to release, since June 2023, our total reports for parking infractions have increased. Our online reports have increased, and our phone calls per week on average have decreased in the year after parking complaints. So what we see here is a correlation between improving the user experience and a reduction in phone calls and diversion online. Another feature that we've allowed is an ability to cancel your complaint online, which was relatively new, again, started last June. Instead of for all complaints filled in online, you're able to request to cancel that complaint. So again, diverting those calls from someone having to call to cancel the complaint, being able to do that online. But we know this parking complaint solution isn't perfect, and like most applications, we continue to iterate, receive user feedback, and apply that to what future state could look like. And we are working through another iteration of parking complaints. The primary feature here is the ability to report in different languages. We recognize Toronto's diversity and different language and abilities, so we want to be able to cater to that, and reporting in different languages is one of those features, as well as letting a user know what they can expect from a next step. So what can you expect if you want to report a complaint that is on private property versus what can you expect if it is overtime parked on the street all night? Being able to tailor that message so the user can see what's next. And then in adherence to a design system and standardized online reporting experience. Parking complaints is one of our many applications that we can report online. So by having a consistent look, feel, experience through, whether you're reporting a parking complaint or whether you're reporting a theft, you'll have a similar type of online reporting experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there, bear with me for a moment as this screen turns over so I can see my colleagues. I'll ask my colleagues, are there questions of staff? Councillor Cheng.
Thank you, and thank you for this presentation. It's great to see the increased uptake of the online portal. I think it's very helpful. I'm just looking at the portal right now, and I'm wondering which category is it if somebody is parked where parking is not allowed. So I see private property as an option, outside of permitted time, blocked driveway, blocked laneway, fire route is blocked. Parked without license plate, accessible parking without a permit, and bike lane being blocked. And I guess I'm just trying to figure out which one I would choose if someone is simply parking where parking is not allowed. Is it outside of the time?
Through the chair, it would depend. I can refer to my colleague maybe from parking enforcement to answer that question.
Currently, they would be using that area, and there is a text section where the person can add comments. So I do agree that there is some clarification in the portal for that. So there is a text box that people will write some of their concerns in. A lot of the times, that concern will end up in the text box, and then we're sorting it out. So that's something that can be further clarified. Overtime parking represents a large percentage of our on-road offenses, a very large percentage.
Right. Okay, so potentially another category might be added just for illegal parking, or more clarity on that in this specific category?
Yeah, we have so many different on-street offenses. It could be quite large. So I do agree that there's another category, but I think it would be, as you said, on-road offense, something very generic. And then the overtime parking, because overtime parking takes up quite a bit of our time. So separating the two issues, one's a quick stop shop where, we enforce very quickly, whereas time offenses, multiple revisits, chalking, what have you. So I do agree that we probably need an extra button on that.
Councillor, if I may add to that question as well, or to that answer as well, on the website for TPS online reporting for parking, there's a section that also says other parking complaints, and we've used that as a catch-all since we're not able to catch every single type of instance. So there is an ability through that, but we are further looking at how to streamline that process of reporting and how to clarify that, and we will involve communities in testing for that as well.
Great. And what I'm hearing from you, it's a continuous learning journey. So I think it'll be just great to see the evolution of this, because I do believe it's an important tool. So just want to pull back to the previous conversation that was had here about noise enforcement, because that's another area where city and TPS has to work together. But just wondering, from a data and reporting perspective, do you think that this similar pathway could be emulated for noise enforcement, or would it be more challenging because MLS does do some sound and noise enforcement, whereas parking is primarily done by TPS?
Through the chair, I mean, it's certainly something we can explore, albeit, it would be a new initiative, but certainly point well taken.
Because as you heard from the deputant, it's very hard for people to track sometimes what's happened to their reporting or how data about noise complaints is shared between TPS and the City of Toronto, because 311 does take noise complaints, but I believe so does the non-emergency line. So there's an overlap in pathways, and maybe it's not clear how data is shared. Maybe someone can speak to that. If not, we can take the conversation offline.
It's okay, Councillor Chang, we'll just give them a moment because there's a team here. They're just working with each other.
Okay. I can't see on my screen. I can't see
Fair
the
enough.
room,
And that was
so-
your last question,
Yeah.
but we'll get an answer.
Yes.
Sorry,
Thank you.
through the chair, we have one of our communication supervisors here that can help clarify how that information is passed on and when.
Good morning. It's Mary Nayland, Assistant Manager of Toronto Police Communication Support. In relation to noise complaints, there's a little bit of a line that we need to look at and whether there's potentially criminality, the number of people on scene, whether there's any danger. So it can be a difference between a 311 response or potentially a police response if we feel there may be a safety issue on arrival. We are currently working on upgrading our core portal, which is other online reports separate from parking. And I think in the future for some types of noise complaints, the core portal may be a better application versus the parking portal. And that would allow for ongoing noise, some of the items that were mentioned earlier, leaf blowers, that sort of thing. If it's a party, that really should be a call into our communication center.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the committee members? Seeing none, I've got a couple myself, just to go over this, just to make sure I've got it clear. So the Toronto Police has, there's 911, everyone knows that. There's a non-emergency number, which has been around for a long time, that somebody would call a complaint into. I imagine some people call parking complaints into there. What happens to the call?
If you call into 911, then it's the same person answering the call as it would be non-emergency. Obviously, 911 takes priority within our queue. So once you've moved through all 911 calls, you start getting into the non-emergency lines.
Okay.
If somebody does call 911 for a parking complaint, we do recommend that they call the non-emergency number, but we do take into consideration customer service. If it's somebody who we don't think might get through or may struggle with the number or could not report online, which we would like them to, then we would take their call.
Right. If they call the non-emergency number to report a parking complaint, do you still process the call or do they get transferred to another desk?
No, absolutely. We take
Okay.
that call as well. We enter the call into the system.
Now, Toronto Police has, you mentioned it before, I think you called it the core reporting portal.
Yes.
And I know I've seen that and I've worked with constituents on that. So that is the catch-all, just like 311 has. You don't have to phone anymore. You can go directly online and enter a complaint. And then the parking portal seems to be very similar to that, but is specific to parking.
That's correct. So the parking portal is specific to parking and is vetted through the parking dispatcher. The core portal goes to our online reporting, which is the prime officers who would do online reports for items like theft or your car was broken into overnight and there's no suspects, no information.
Now, I know the core portal is watched even by the local divisions because they're understanding the type of things that are happening and they develop their enforcement plans. Is parking enforcement looking at the information that's flowing in from the parking enforcement portal to help sculpt what you do in the weeks and months going ahead to make sure that you're responding as best as you can to the trends and customers' demands?
So we have a series of area supervisors who represent your councillor wards, and they look at information. They receive complaints directly, but they also look at information coming in through our I would say our communication and post unit. And our post unit was an improvement to help communications deal with the incredible volume that we receive at parking enforcement. So we receive data points from those groups and those area offices, which I'm sure most of the councillors interact with. They take that to look at through our enforcement on an ongoing basis to help communities that have issues with 3-hour parking on the streets and what have you, so they're not having to call in all the time. So yeah, we do use that data continually, and I think that's an area where we can continue to learn and grow and to build that out. And I think it's an excellent resource for us. My experience since June of 2023, being on the front desk for quite some time, I've noticed that we're having a tremendous impact on the call-ins, and people seem to be very impressed with the dashboard and the ability to go through 311 or to call the Toronto Police number 2222 and get on that link. So I think it's working very well, and I think we're on the right track.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, members wishing to speak? I'll speak very, very briefly. Thank you to Toronto Police Service for coming today and for all of the work that you do. As we can see, things are evolving very quickly, and I think the work that you're doing, although it is separate from the City of Toronto, the public sees it as really, really valuable. And it parallels very much what we're doing inside the Toronto Public Service. I invite you to continue to work with councillors and to explore the information you learn from your data gathering portal and to continue to develop it, because I know this is a busy service, and because I hear from constituents as well, and there are sometimes concerns out there with parking. It's just a really important and busy aspect of city life. So thank you for coming today. I will make one observation, is I know that it can be difficult for members of the public to divide and figure out the difference between 311 and the Toronto Police Service, and I know that there is a lot of bridge work between the two, and we didn't get into today's presentation. And I would just encourage our team at the City of Toronto and the Toronto Police Service to continually look at the details of that bridge to make it as easy as possible for people to navigate, and I guess the term is make the right call, because we don't want the calls going to 911 for very clear reasons, but we want people to have the shortest distance between picking up the phone or going to the computer to get to the service. So thank you. And that is it. So we'll go on to our next item. Pardon me, the clerk reminded me, the motion is to clerk's advised it is to adopt to receive the report for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Okay, we're on to the next item. All right, we're going to do the presentation first. That is SE 6.3, the Listening to Toronto Survey. I see we have our city manager here to speak to us today. Welcome, Mr. Johnson. Please go ahead as soon as you're ready, sir.
Well, thanks very much, and thanks to you, Chair, and the members of the committee. Today we're pleased to present, and I'm going to give some short remarks at the beginning and then turn it over to the experts who delivered this work. We're going to present the results of polling data that came out of a survey that we administered through Ipsos in late August through to the middle of September. This is an attempt to build further data around how Torontonians are feeling about their city and how they're feeling about the services that we provide. As you'll see from the presentation that we're going to get into in a second, there is lots for us to be pleased about in terms of the work of the Toronto Public Service, and lots of room for us to continue to respond to the needs of Torontonians and improve those services that we provide. I think it's important to realize that this doesn't usurp or take over for anything else that we're doing. Program level surveys that happen day to day, even some polling that happens in specific services, and of course the rich data in 311 is all part of how we try and make services better here at the City of Toronto. But this gives us a citywide snapshot delivered in a way through professionals that can give us a sense of really what Torontonians are thinking on a variety of areas. You will see information about how they feel about their own situation within the city. And while not surprising that many Torontonians, though feeling very good about the place that they live, have concerns about aspects of daily life, those are important things for us to remember as we deliver and develop new service offerings here at the City of Toronto. Interesting, some of the top noted issues by Torontonians align with our strategic priorities at the City of Toronto. You know, from a making quality of life better perspective in Toronto, we have 4 strategic priorities, 3 of which were highlighted again by Torontonians in this polling result. And they include housing, moving people around the city, transportation, and investments in neighborhoods linked to crime, to poverty and homelessness, and the delivery of services at that neighborhood level. So that's good news that we continue to align with the needs of Torontonians. When it comes to our own services, it's a tale of 2 things. The interaction that people have with the people who deliver services, the satisfaction level across the board continues to be very high, including those who interact with us when they have issues or come to the city for some of the services and interact from a customer service perspective. Some of our programs are rated at a satisfaction level that approaches 90% or above. And even when it comes to our customer experience, about 3/4 of Torontonians say they are satisfied with the interaction they have with our public service. On the infrastructure side, we certainly have work to do. When it comes to things like our parks and recreation center, cleanliness and the overall amenities within those services have room for improvement. When it comes to transportation, people want to see more done so that they can get around this city in a timely way and in the way that makes most sense for them. And you'll see in a second, I'm not going to give too many of the highlights away, but apparently we should be riding motorcycles or scooters because the satisfaction with transportation, if you get around Toronto in those modes, is actually fairly high. So what we're going to do with this information is, of course, merge it together with all the other data that we have coming out of things like 311 and our own service level data and survey work that happens in individual surveys. And then we're going to be able to use this information as we go forward. We will continue to conduct these types of surveys at regular intervals. This really does become a baseline for the City of Toronto. So while this is important information for us to take some action on, what will be more important is the future follow-ups to this that show whether the trends are changing or not. I'm going to turn things over to Martin from Ipsos Public Affairs, who's going to take you through the slide deck today, and then staff and Martin himself will be available for questions if you have them. Thanks very much, Chair.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today to present the results of the recent survey, Listening to Toronto, that we conducted on behalf of the city. Just in terms of an introduction, I'm going to give you a brief background on some of the types of questions we asked, methodology, and then I'll go into some of the detailed findings. So we asked Torontonians what's the most important issue for them, for the city to focus on. We asked questions about perceptions of quality of life and other aspects of living in the cities. We wanted to understand their priorities for the city budget. We also deep dived into perceptions of transportation, parks, safety, cleanliness, and also their interactions with city staff. In terms of the methodology, this is a representative survey that we conducted online. Ipsos maintains a pre-recruited online panel that we reach out to conduct this kind of research. It's a very common methodology that's used in public opinion today. We surveyed 1,018 Torontonians over the age of 18 in English, and we also conducted some in-language interviews among residents, namely in Cantonese, Mandarin, Portuguese, Punjab, and Tamil. So in total, the sample size is 1,142, which is quite a large sample size for a survey of this kind. The survey was fielded in early August and mid-September, and the data is also weighted according to age, gender, and region to ensure that it is representative of the population of city residents who are 18 years of age and older. So in terms of the key findings, just quickly, and I'm going to get into some of the details as we move on, over 6 in 10 rate the quality of life in the City of Toronto as good or very good. However, we also found that about 50% of Torontonians feel that their quality of life has worsened over the course of the past 12 months. 6 in 10 Torontonians are satisfied with the streets and transportation system overall. So when we talk about the transportation system, we talk about sidewalks, we talk about roads, we talk about bike paths. That's an overall impression. Among those who have used a recreation program or service provided by the City of Toronto, which is about 33% of residents in the past 12 months, satisfaction is very high, with about 9 in 10 residents saying that they are satisfied with their Parks and Rec program experience. A large majority of Torontonians are also satisfied with their parks and outdoor spaces at about 80%. However, we find satisfaction for things like washrooms quite lower at 52%. Satisfaction among those residents who have used a social service provided by the City of Toronto is quite high. It's at 8 in 10. Overall, we found almost 6 in 10 Torontonians feel safe in the City of Toronto. We also found that about 6 in 10 Torontonians are satisfied with the overall cleanliness of the city. Among those who have contacted the city, 75% say that they're satisfied with their interaction. And finally, 58% of Torontonians are very or somewhat satisfied with the overall quality of information that they receive from the city. So I'm going to take you through some of the detailed findings. So first off, to start the survey, in an open-ended way, we asked residents to provide feedback on what they feel is the most important issue that the city, their councillor, should focus on to them. Again, this is an open-ended question where we take people's verbatim responses and then we code it into categories. You can see on top it's housing. So 28% of residents feel that housing, including the cost of housing, the affordability of housing, assisted housing, is the most important issue to them. Followed by transportation, namely congestion, travel times, TTC, followed by crime, poverty, homeless, cost of living, and you can see as the list goes down. In terms of quality of life, 64% of residents say that their quality of life today in the City of Toronto is good or very good. Conversely, 36% of residents say that their quality of life in the city is poor or very poor. Here throughout the report, you can see some call-outs for different demographic groups that we want to highlight. So in terms of those who are more likely to rate their quality of life as good or very good, they are more likely to be men compared to women. They're also more likely to be residents who are satisfied with the transportation system. On the other hand, when we look at those residents who rate the quality of life poorly in Toronto, it's more likely to be women compared to men. In terms of changes in the quality of life over the course of the past 12 months, we found that about 4 in 10 residents say that their quality of life has remained the same, and about 50% of residents say that their quality of life has worsened over the course of the past 12 months. About 1 in 10 said it has improved. At Ipsos, we conduct a lot of these kind of citizen satisfaction surveys across the country, so we have a normative database where we ask similar questions in other regions. Just to give you some context, right now, in other municipalities and cities across the country, the average, it's about 4 in 10 residents say that their quality of life has worsened over the past 12 months, and this is a trend that we've seen continue or increase since the pandemic. Those residents that are more likely to say that their quality of life has worsened include women, include those residents 55 years of age and older, and also higher income households. So those households that earn an average household income of $150,000 or more are more likely to say that their quality of life has worsened compared to those households who earn less. In terms of agreement with the number of statements about living in the City of Toronto, so this is quality of life, you can see that 3/4 of residents rate their quality of life as very good. 75% of residents strongly agree or somewhat agree that the City of Toronto is a welcoming community. 72% of residents feel that they are proud to live in the City of Toronto. However, as we go down the list, you can see that agreement is somewhat lower. I have confidence in the City of Toronto to provide programs and services that I need at 58%, and on the bottom, only a minority of residents agreeing that the City of Toronto is moving in the right direction to ensure a high quality of life for me and my family today. In terms of budget priorities, we also asked in an open-ended way to residents to provide what they feel should be the top priorities for the City of Toronto's 2025 budget. As you can see, these responses very much mirror the most important issue that residents mentioned as well. Housing comes on top, followed by transportation, crime, infrastructure, and healthcare. We also wanted residents to rank one of these three issues or topics when thinking about what the budget in 2025 should focus on, and what we found that is overwhelmingly residents would like the city to focus on bringing down the cost of living. 66% of residents ranked this first. In terms of making it easier to get around the city, 19% of residents mentioned this first, and in terms of investing in the city, only 13% mentioned this first. So definitely a focus that residents would appreciate in terms of reducing the cost of living in the city. So moving on to transportation, this is one of the areas where we deep dived in the survey. We found that 6 in 10, so a majority of residents telling us that they are very or somewhat satisfied with the city's transportation system, which includes streets, roads, sidewalks, cycling infrastructure, even things like street signs and traffic lights. On the other hand, 41% of residents telling us that they are dissatisfied. Those residents between the ages of 18 and 34 are more likely to be satisfied with the transportation system, while residents 55 years of age and older are more likely to be dissatisfied. We also wanted to look at satisfaction by the mode or the type of transportation that residents use most often in the city. As was mentioned, 74% of those residents, keep in mind this is quite a small proportion of residents who motorcycle or scooter around the city, but they are the most satisfied with the transportation system, followed by those who cycle at 64%, rideshare, using a taxi, 62, public transit, so those folks that use public transit as the main means of getting around the city, 60% satisfied, walking 59%, and 58% among drivers. We also wanted to understand from residents what they feel are the things that can be done to improve their transportation experience in the City of Toronto. So number one, at 46%, residents mentioned transportation infrastructure. So this includes things like bike lanes, construction issues, roads. If we unpack that a little bit, so looking at that 46%, 17% of residents mentioned bike lanes. This includes 10% of residents who want to see a reduction in bike lanes and 7% of residents who want to see more bike lanes. 16% mention construction. So when residents are talking about construction, they're talking about faster construction. They're talking about a reduction in closures, and they're just talking about less construction in general. And looking at roads, which make up the other 16% of the 46, 5% mention fixed roads, more lanes, more roads, period. We also wanted to understand some of the challenges that Torontonians face when they get around the city. Traffic management and flow was mentioned by 73% of residents. Again, tends to be the more higher income group of residents. You can see there on the right, so those residents that earn a household income of $150,000 or more are much more likely to mention things like traffic management and flow. When residents talk about traffic management, they're talking about too many vehicles or vehicles impeding the flow of traffic on roads. 71%, so a very similar proportion, mentioned transportation infrastructure. Road construction, road repairs really comes out here. Obstructed sidewalks, also bike lanes come up. And then 37% of residents mentioned public transport, so a lack of public transport or closures on public transport. These tend to be residents who earn a lower household income in the city. Now looking at recreation and library programs. So among those residents that have used a recreation or library program in the past 12 months, which is about 33% of residents, satisfaction is very high. So 9 in 10 residents tell us that they are very or somewhat satisfied with their experience. About 1 in 10 of those residents who used one of these programs say that they are somewhat or very dissatisfied with their experience. We also wanted to look at satisfaction of various types of recreation and library programs that residents are using. So again, this is only among those folks that have actually used one of these programs. Leadership, every 100% of residents who have taken a leadership program say that they're satisfied. Overall satisfaction quite high, 96% for any virtual recreation program that residents have taken. Library satisfaction's at 95%, going down the list where satisfaction is the lowest, but it's still 89% saying that they're satisfied with a fitness program that they've taken provided by the city. We also wanted to understand from residents what, if any, additional programs that they would like to see, that they would like to participate in. So residents mentioned a variety here, namely fitness and exercise programs, so sports and swimming, also programs for specific age groups, children as well as seniors and perhaps adults, and then other programs around healthy lifestyles or entertainment programs as well were mentioned more often by residents. So now deep diving into parks, we wanted to understand resident satisfaction with various types of parks and various types of facilities offered by the city. Overall, we found that 80% of residents are satisfied with parks or outdoor spaces in the city, 81% satisfied with sports fields and parks. You can see going down the list, we can see satisfaction's the lowest. For washrooms in parks, only about 53% of residents saying that they are satisfied with washrooms in parks, and about 2/3 of residents saying that they're satisfied with things like water fountains in their parks. In terms of changes of quality of parks over the past year, we found the majority of residents say that it's remained pretty consistent. 6 in 10 residents saying that their perception of the quality of parks in the city has stayed the same. About 14% of residents say that it's improved, and about 25% of residents feel that parks have gotten worse over the course of the past 12 months. And then in terms of suggestions for improving parks and the experience that residents have in parks in the city, cleanliness was mentioned most often. So things like litter, more bins specifically was mentioned by 35% of residents. Other improvements, including keeping cars out or adding activities or fitness spaces, safety and security. So a variety of other things were mentioned by residents in terms of improving parks. Now looking at social services provided by the city for children and senior, again, so among those residents that have used a social service provided by the city, which again is around 30%, the vast majority, 81%, saying that they are very or somewhat satisfied, compared to about 1 in 5 who say that they are dissatisfied with their experience using a social service provided by the city. Here we've looked at a number of different social services provided by the city. You'll know that there's a number in brackets next to some of the bars, so that just indicates the number of people that were responding to each of these. So it's a somewhat low base size, which means there's not as many people answering these questions, just to give you some context. However, satisfaction is quite high for those people that have reported using a school nutrition program, seniors day programming, childcare. It's about 9 in 10 or more residents satisfied with this social service. Going down the list, affordable housing, 74% of residents saying that they are satisfied with this, and this includes subsidized housing as well. Now, in terms of public safety, we found that 6 in 10 Torontonians agree that overall they feel safe in the city of Toronto, compared to about 4 in 10 residents who disagree that they feel safe in the city of Toronto. You can see perceptions of safety varying quite differently in terms of when residents are experiencing this. So if feeling safe in their neighborhood during the day, the overwhelming majority of residents agree that they feel safe. However, when we're looking at nighttime safety, for example, I feel safe in parks at night, only 35% of residents agree with this. Or I feel safe in my neighborhood at night, significantly more, small majority at 6 in 10 residents. We also wanted to understand the safety of residents as they travel and move around the city, to see if it differed by the type of transportation that residents use. In terms of being a pedestrian, so 62% of residents agree that they feel safe as a pedestrian in the city of Toronto. Similarly for using public transit as a public transit user, and also quite similarly for being a driver in the city of Toronto, so 57% of drivers saying that they feel safe. As a cyclist, a little bit lower at 47%, so telling us that they agree that they feel safe as a cyclist in the city of Toronto. And in terms of improving neighborhood safety, again, we asked residents in an open-ended way any suggestions that they had. 51% of residents highlighted crime, increased law enforcement as a suggestion for improving neighborhood safety. Other suggestions include improving signage, not allowing cycling on walkways, coyotes, drugs and alcohol use, or lighting and surveillance, also mentioned by some residents. We also wanted to understand awareness of the Toronto Community Crisis Response Teams. For mental health support, we found that about 35% of residents have read, seen, or heard something about this support. Those more likely to have heard about this program include those who have identified as having a disability, those who have identified with an Indigenous background, and those with children in the household. Now looking at cleanliness, again, about 58% of residents saying that they are very or somewhat satisfied with the overall cleanliness in the city. Here you can see ratings of different aspects of cleanliness. So in terms of cleanliness of the residents' local neighborhood, it's about 7 in 10 residents telling us that they are satisfied with this. Cleanliness of parks, around 64%. Going down the list, satisfaction with cleanliness is lowest on public transit, although a small majority, or about half, 54%, saying that they are satisfied with cleanliness on public transport. In terms of suggestions for improving cleanliness in the neighborhood where residents live, most often mentioning garbage, again, similar to what we saw in parks. So more collection, more bins, more frequent collection, followed by more cleaning. So more often cleaning things like the streets and the sidewalks, and also park maintenance. So now looking at service interactions, so we found that about 25% of residents told us that they have in fact interacted with the city over the course of the past 12 months. Those residents that are more likely to have interacted with the city include those with children, so under 18, living at home, those who identify with a disability, and those who have also used a social service over the course of the past 12 months. So among that 25% of residents who have interacted with the city, we found that satisfaction is quite high at 3/4, so 39% saying they're very satisfied, 36% of residents saying they're somewhat satisfied with their interaction with city staff. Satisfaction tends to be higher among younger residents, so those residents between the ages of 18 and 34, and also men. Found that 25% of residents who have had an interaction say that they are dissatisfied, either very or somewhat. In terms of the various aspects of an interaction that somebody would have with city staff, so overall, 73% saying that they're satisfied with the overall service that they receive from city staff. Staff perform quite highly in terms of courteousness, professionalism, and knowledge. Going down the list, the staff went the extra mile to ensure what I received is what I needed, slightly lower at 62% of those who have had an interaction saying that they're satisfied. Finally, looking at communications, so we found that 58% of residents said they are very or somewhat satisfied with the general information and communications that they've received by the city. 24% of residents telling us that they are dissatisfied. About 1 in 5 said they didn't know, so they probably couldn't recall some kind of or any kind of recent communication from the City of Toronto. We also wanted to understand perceptions of the frequency in which the city communicates with its residents. We found that about half, so 53% of residents saying that the city communicates just about right. However, a significant proportion of residents, about 4 in 10 residents, saying that the city communicates too little to them. So perhaps an opportunity to enhance communications with residents as there is an openness to receiving more communications. Only 6% of residents told us that they receive too much information from the City of Toronto. In terms of the methods that the City of Toronto could use to communicate information to residents, we wanted to understand which methods were most preferred by residents, and it is a bit of a mix. So email comes on top, mail and newsletter and pamphlets, flyers in the mail still comes on top. Obviously, this differs a little bit depending on age group, younger residents tending to prefer things like social media and email. However, mail and newsletter, the kind of traditional forms of information, still preferred by a significant proportion of younger residents. In terms of the type of social media that residents would like to receive information from the city, Instagram and Facebook come out clearly ahead of other forms of social media. So that's some of the highlights from the survey. I just threw a lot of numbers and stats at everyone, but happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you. So we are going to have a speaker first, and then we'll go to questions. I'm sure there's a few, but thank you for joining us today. Our registered speaker is Ingrid Boudet. Welcome back to the microphone, Ingrid. You have 5 minutes. Please begin as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Chair Holiday. Okay. Excellent. Well, I only had intended to speak on one item, but then when I saw this, I had to, I would be negligent if I didn't speak up on SE 6.3, listening to Toronto survey. So thank you so much for this opportunity. Everybody in the room knows who I am now, so thank you very much. So this survey was in support of service excellence and continuous improvement, and the city manager initiated a public opinion poll, which I think is great. And it's important to get those baseline satisfaction levels. And just for the people who might be watching, this was done from August 28th, 2024 to September 18th, and 1,142 residents were polled. So I'm very glad to have gone after the presentation, and because I was looking at the list and I saw that something was missing, and I think it's probably bucketed in the overall quality of life. That 50% of the population say their quality of life has worsened. And interesting that it was women and also people of higher income. And 55% of Toronto say, 55% respondents say that Toronto is not moving in the right direction. And that's certainly what my members are feeling. And when I looked at this list, I was like, well, there's something missing in here. And many of you probably think it's noise, but I actually think it's health. I think people need to be asked, did you have a good sleep? Because I think all of us can understand that when we don't have a good sleep, we don't have a good quality of life. We don't feel good in the morning, we're not nice to our partners, we're not productive at work, and we generally just don't feel good. And so maybe this was out of scope for this survey, but if we were to ask people about their sleep, I think we would understand a lot more about people's quality of life, because when you don't sleep well, it impacts your mental health. In noise-induced sleep disturbance increases stress hormones, leading to anxiety, depression, and irritability. Cognitive impairment, poor sleep affects focus, memory, and decision-making, making it harder to concentrate and think clearly. I certainly feel that some days. Physical health, frequent noise interrupts your body's natural sleep cycle, raising the risk of heart disease, high blood pressure, and stroke. I have a history of stroke in my family, and every time a loud muffler goes by, they do not increase my quality of life. So good sleep isn't just important, it's essential for overall well-being. So just as a note, physical health outcomes of noise are, and from the Toronto Public Health Healthy Aging Summary, they contribute to the top percentages of people living with chronic conditions by age groups, leading causes of hospitalization, and the leading causes of death. And I've highlighted dementia and Alzheimer's disease in the bottom right because noise also impacts our mental health outcomes. It's shown to increase Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and loneliness. And when I look at the stats and how seniors are feeling that their quality of life is going down, I wonder how much noise has to do with that, because that increases isolation. They don't go to restaurants. They don't feel like they can leave their homes and feel safe. So the cost of noise pollution is expensive. Medical expenses related to noise-induced health issues, loss of productivity due to noise, related stress and sleep disturbance, decline in property values in noisy areas. And the U.S. incurs billions of dollars annually due to noise pollution. A report by the National Institutes of Health indicate that noise-induced hearing loss alone costs the U.S. healthcare system more than $242 million annually, never mind depressants and anti-anxiety pills and everything else that comes along with it. So I'm really glad that we have this data, but I think that it's missing something. It's missing health, and it's missing the understanding of what can help people have a better sleep. And when I ask about people's health, I do lots of surveys, and I've just added a new question, which was, have you ever been unable to work or not perform your activities of daily living due to this noise? And this is 77% say yes, and this is due to amplified sound. So noise has a direct impact on the productivity and the well-being and the quality of life of residents in Toronto. And when I did a buffer analysis, over 60% of people live within 750 meters of a highway or 100 meters of an arterial road, and they get hundreds of noise spikes a day. It's less in the winter, it's more in the summer, but it's significant every single day. I hear them every single day. So ask, hey, did you get a restful restorative sleep? Ask people to rate their mental health. Ask people to rate their physical health. And I think that way, we'll be able to create a better Toronto by reducing noise. Thank you.
Thank you. If you just pause for a moment, I gotta wait for that screen to come back to see if there's questions, but thank you for joining us. Are there any questions of the speaker? Seeing none, once again, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, back to the committee. Questions of staff on the survey. And I do believe we also have someone from Martin is from Ipsos is here as well, somewhere. Okay. Councillor Cheng.
Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It's very insightful. I'm curious, so it says something about the sampling quota that you ensured that there was good representation across age, gender, and region. I'm just trying to understand what you mean by region. Do you mean the different boroughs of the city?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Councillor. Yeah, we use the former city boroughs as regions to ensure that we can look at the results by different regions in the city, including Etobicoke, North York, Scarborough, former Metro, etc.
And would it be possible to extract the data by region so that we can see the difference across the city?
Yes, that's correct.
So that can be made available?
Yes, we have cross tabulations for the data, so we can look at the data by different age groups, region, including former borough, gender, household income, education, etc. We've looked at the regional difference at a high level in the report, and we would have identified any statistical significant differences in the region. At the top of my head, I can't remember any large, real differences in the region, but as a high-level report, we haven't gone into detail, but that information is available, yes.
And would a summary of the differences be made available at some point to councillors?
I believe so. That can be made available.
Great. I'm curious about the large gender disparity in terms of satisfaction in several categories. It seems that in general, men seem to be more satisfied, and women tend to have more representation in the dissatisfied categories. Is this something that has been seen in other municipalities as well, or is this unique to Toronto?
We do see this as well, this trend in the other municipal research that we conduct, yeah. So Toronto's not unique in that sense.
And any guesses as to why that may be the case, or has there been any analysis done of why there would be this gender disparity in experience of the city?
Here for this survey, no. We haven't looked at that specifically, but contextually, we find that levels of satisfaction among residents are often different among parents. Children at home, you see that as well here, and women tend to express some of those differences more often in the survey research. In greater detail in the city specifically, why there is such a greater gap among men and women, we haven't looked at.
Mm-hmm. And on page 23, just about the fitness programs, or actually maybe it's 22, what is the percentage of those surveyed that actually have accessed programs and services at the local community center?
So I believe it's 33% of residents have accessed one of these programs in the past 12 months.
Right. Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Other questions of the staff? Seeing none, I will ask a couple of brief ones. Mr. Robsky, thank you. Fascinating. I enjoy reading this material and listening to what you told us today. But what you ask is important. Who you ask it to is really important. And when you ask it is important. Could you tell me a little bit about the people that you surveyed and how you got to them?
Good question. So we maintain a pre-recruited online panel of hundreds of thousands of people across the country that are recruited to conduct surveys. So these would have had to be residents who reside in the City of Toronto, and we pull a representative sample from this panel. So by representative sample, we use the most recent census data to ensure that we have an equal proportion of men, women, where people live, and their age groups to match the census, and then we interview them in the online survey.
How do they end up on your panel? Are they volunteers? Okay.
So they come to us to join a panel. There are some very small incentives or points that are offered to people to complete the research. It's a very common way of conducting public opinion research these days. Other methods would include telephone surveys or mail surveys as well.
And why did you choose the time? Or is that just because you were asked to do it?
We were asked to do it.
Okay. And is there significance or things to think about when choosing to conduct these surveys? Perhaps I would loosely argue that's a really busy time, right? The end of August, the beginning of September for a lot of people. So their mind is on certain things. And that, I think, would affect the results, but maybe that's what you want. So could you tell me about that sort of concept?
Yeah, deciding when to do one of these surveys, there's pros and cons with many different times of the year. You know, for example, July, August might not be great because people are on vacation. Now we're entering the holiday season, that might be challenging. There's also seasonality with these types of surveys. If you do a survey in the winter and ask residents their satisfaction with services right after a snowstorm, it's going to be very different than during the summer months, right? So seasonality is important when you're doing these surveys. The time of year that we did in September is actually quite common because people will hold off during the summer perhaps to do this type of survey, so it's not uncommon to do it at that point.
Okay. A few minutes ago we were talking about our dashboard and looking at the millions of calls that come in, or million plus calls I should say, come into the City of Toronto, and tied up there with MLS was the number 2 issue was garbage bin replacement, but I didn't see it here. So any insights why it's such a busy thing at 311, but it didn't come up in this particular survey?
Well, I think in the 311 data that you have, you're looking at the perspective of people who have had an interaction with 311 on a specific issue, whereas here in the survey we're talking to all residents in the city. Only 25% of the people that we talked to had an interaction with the city. So we're essentially surveying the 75% of residents who might have perhaps not used something like 311 to interact with the city.
So on that note, do you know, and maybe I'm putting you on the spot, what was happening in the news cycle or just generally in the broad public discussion about the city that might have informed opinions? So perhaps by contrast, as we enter budget discussions and it becomes more prevalent in the news cycle and people are talking about it at their kitchen table, that would begin to draw interest to those issues. But do you know what was happening at the end of August or September that it might have informed people's opinions on this? Or does it not matter?
It can, the news cycle, these are perceptions of residents, so, the news cycle can influence the way that people think about things. I think also oftentimes what we might think is really a big deal in the news cycle, a lot of people are focused on the day-to-day of their lives as well. So it's really hard to quantify that. I can't say that people aren't paying attention to the news cycle. I think it can impact the way people think, but I also think we need to take that sometimes with a grain of salt, as not all residents are really engaged with the news cycle all the time.
So just to add to that, to you, Chair, we recognize that this survey is a point-in-time survey. So part of the interest that we have as staff is that this provides some foundational information that is complementary to other data that we collect, which was the intention. What don't we see in 311 data, but that we want information about? So the idea moving forward is that we could repeat and continue to do subsequent point-in-time surveys that would also help address some of the seasonal pieces that Martin's speaking to.
Thank you. Any other questions of staff? Anyone wishing to speak on this item? Seeing none, I do have a very brief motion. I hope folks will find that helpful, so I'll ask the clerk to put that up. So it's a small ask, but I think it's important. And the city manager did allude to it, but I put it in writing here for the committee, and this report will go forward to the executive committee as part of the pathway. But I'm just going to suggest that we take a look at the differences between the 311 and the customer experience data, which is all of the different calls that we get into the 311 system. And as I said in my earlier questions, a lot of people call about garbage bin replacements, but that wasn't one of the top issues here. But conversely, I know water fountains came up as really important, but we don't necessarily see that in the 311 data. And so the question is why? What can we learn from those sorts of things? So, hopefully we can have a follow-up discussion on this once we have a look at it. And I would just say more broadly is, thank you to the city manager and to your team. And thank you to the survey, the survey administrators. I find this fascinating, and I don't recall seeing something like this in my time at City Hall. And I think this is really useful information and provides valuable insight to the pulse of the city, but also what we need to be thinking about as council as we make decisions and we set priorities. So really, job well done, and I'm really glad that we had a chance to talk about it today. Are there anyone else wishing to speak on it? No? On the amendment, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And on the item as amended, all those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Thank you once again. Okay, we are on to item number SE 6.4, which is the Parks, Forestry and Recreation Urban Forestry Service Standards for Tree Maintenance and Planting Request presentation. And I will welcome the team from Parks, Forestry and Recreation to the microphone and invite you to begin as soon as you're ready.
Okay, good afternoon. Just while we're loading up, I will quickly introduce myself, Howie Dayton, General Manager, Parks, Forestry and Recreation, and with me is Kim Stathen, Director of Urban Forestry. And we are really happy to be here today to bring forward the presentation on the Urban Forestry branch and its integrated service delivery with 311. This presentation's focus is tree maintenance and planning to respond to Councillor Ainsley's motion, which was presented at the September meeting of the Service Excellence Committee. Toronto's urban forest is vital green infrastructure, critical to quality of life and the city's climate resilience. Toronto's current tree canopy cover is 31%. It is comprised of 11.5 million trees, 45% of which are located on public land. There is a modest team of just under 400 staff who undertake urban forestry service delivery with an annual operating budget in 2024 of $80.5 million. Based on the 2008 and 2018 tree canopy studies, we have seen a 25% improvement on street tree conditions, which is one indicator that reflects excellent progress on our service delivery goals. There are 4 service areas within urban forestry that help to keep our urban canopy vital and growing. Tree protection and plan review teams implement and enforce the city's tree bylaws, which regulate tree removal and injuries and ensure replacement tree planting. Forest policy and planning have oversight on forest policies, standards, and strategies, and manage communication and data management. Forestry operations maintains trees on city road allowances and public parkland, both reactively and proactively. And urban forest renewal and forest and natural area management undertakes tree planting and ecological restoration, volunteer and incentive programs, and forest healthcare and invasive species management. Urban Forestry is integrated with 311, who provide frontline customer service for this branch. To support a full customer service experience, Urban Forestry also has a data management center, which provides a second-tier customer service function when required. This graph shows the top 10 service request types created by 311 or Urban Forestry's data management center. As you would expect, with the tree canopy as large as the city's, tree pruning and tree emergency cleanup are the biggest component in this top 10. Tree planting is the next highest requested service. It is clear to see from these requests that residents of Toronto are certainly interested in and care about the maintenance and growth of the city's tree canopy. Both 311 and the Urban Forestry Data Management Center create service requests for a variety of the services that Urban Forestry provides. These service requests create inspections that Urban Forestry staff conduct to determine what kind of work is required. Inspections are required to ensure that the appropriate work is prescribed to the tree and it is prioritized appropriately. Once that inspection is complete, a work order is generated for specific work as well as a priority status. And I'm now going to turn it over to Kim for the balance of the presentation.
Good afternoon. So we will now turn our focus to the tree maintenance and tree planting service areas as directed for this presentation. This slide demonstrates the total work volume over a 3-year period, showing work orders compared to service requests generated by 311. The third column in each annual grouping shows the percentage of total work that is originated as a 311 service request. I will draw your attention to 2 specific areas that demonstrate 2 different examples of Urban Forestry's integrated service delivery with 311. Tree planting in row 1. Much of the tree planting work completed by Urban Forestry is proactively planned. Just a small portion of that work is generated by customer request through 311. Between 2022 and Q3 of 2024, the percentage of 311 SRs, or service requests, compared to total work is roughly 7%. By comparison, storm cleanup, that was referred to as tree emergency cleanup in the previous slide, in row 4 is highly reactive. For example, based on storms and extreme weather, with many customers calling 311 for service concurrently. You see service requests compared to total work as consistently higher than 100% for reasons such as 311 receiving multiple calls on the same issue. These service requests are then inspected by staff to ensure that only one work order is created per issue. This slide now shows the existing service standard for these same 5 service request types and the percentage completion rate over the last 3 years. As you will recall, the tree maintenance service area was recently audited in 2021 by Toronto's Auditor General. This audit was focused on ensuring value for money and meeting efficiencies through improved crew oversight, contract management, and operational productivity. Through the successful implementation of a number of AG recommendations, concrete improvements in crew oversight, contract language, and efficiencies in scheduling work were realized. The data in this table and associated chart shows the direct correlation between improvements made across the different service areas and an increase in the percentage completed within the service standard. A few examples of the kinds of efficiency improvements include bundling work by geographic location to reduce driving times, improved parked car relocations so crews can get to work faster, and business transformation with regard to contract and crew oversight. As a final reflection on this slide, 2022 saw 2 significant weather events which impacted the ability to meet service standards because crews were redeployed to respond to storm cleanup over proactive pruning and removals. 2023 represents the onset of improvements to contract language and that dedicated city staff were used to monitor new unit rate and stumping contracts. 2024 shows drastic improvement in meeting service standards, a result of contract, technology, and operational improvements combined. The next 3 slides provide a few keynotes on how tree maintenance and planting are planned, orchestrated, and completed. As mentioned, all service requests require an inspection prior to the work being conducted. This is critical for a few reasons. Expert staff determine tree health and update our data inventory. They prescribe the appropriate work to ensure optimal health and longevity of the tree. And in many cases, our teams also take time to notify residents of work to take place. For example, tree planting along residential streets to allow for engagement and awareness with adjacent property owners. There are cases where some requests do not require the work requested, such as request for work which turns out to be a privately owned tree. In many cases, we also receive requests for tree pruning, which has already been done to service standard, and further work is not required. The inspection also provides a clear indication of how urgent the work needs to be completed to ensure risk mitigation with regard to infrastructure, people, and property. Regarding logistics, as mentioned, we plan work based on priorities such as immediate hazards and safety of the general public. We bundle work based on the type of crew required for the work in that geographic area. Some of the considerations for this work would include such things as tree size, consideration for the amount of wood that needs to be removed, and supporting equipment size like cranes, chippers, or truck beds, site conditions. In Toronto, we have a significant number of different street types, like on-street parking, wide boulevards that are either paved or in turf. And most forestry equipment is quite large in size, and choosing the correct equipment for the job will allow better accessibility and safety for workers to conduct the tree work. Supporting materials also need to be considered to ensure optimal survivability or restoration after stump removal for future tree planting locations. And there's also consideration for crew size, expertise, and cost. There's varying different compositions of crew sizes, crane sizes, and bucket trucks, and they all have varying costs. As part of the implementation of the Auditor General's recommendations, ensuring we are making the most efficient use of time for the cost we are paying is also a strong consideration. So this slide just gives you a bit of a sense of the different equipment that is required for the different phases of work. So topping, which is in plain language, removing the branches or the top of the tree, is typically completed with the knuckle boom crane and bucket trucks. In addition to these two cranes, there are supporting equipment such as chippers and other trucks required to bring the tree components back to yard facilities when they're full. Stemming, also known as removing the trunk of the tree, is done again with two different types of cranes and supporting equipment. These typically could involve mobile cranes, bucket trucks, and again, trucks for wood removal. We also use chippers for brush and small diameter wood in this step. Stumping, the equipment for stumping includes two trucks, one that tows the equipment, and then space in the back of the truck for the materials that are produced. And finally, planting. This is just an example of a truck that includes all of the components required for successful tree planting, including soil, the trees, stakes, and mulch. And the bottom of the slide shows the seasonality of our operation. Topping and stemming can occur year-round. Stumping generally is a 3-season operation, pausing only when winter conditions such as heavy snow or ice are present. And tree planting only occurs in spring and fall, but our teams spend summer and winter planning and undertaking notifications and engagement. I'll now pass it back to Howie.
Thanks, Kim. As a result of contract, technology, and operational improvements driven by the Auditor General's recommendations, tree maintenance and planting service standard success is trending positive over a 3-year period. Good quality service, both on trees and for Toronto customers, is imperative to maintain and grow a healthy urban forest and meet City Council's target of a 40% canopy cover by 2050. Continuous improvement is required to ensure the significant work volumes across all service areas are completed to current service standards. In 2024, we reported to Infrastructure and Environment Committee with respect to the commencement of a quality service pilot and an upcoming review of our service standards and processes, staff qualifications, and industry best practices. This information is discussed in more detail on the next slide. Work in 2025 will include a significant review of existing tree and park tree maintenance programs with a recommended framework for improvements taking into consideration a best practices scan of other jurisdictions. As requested by the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, we will be reviewing resources, staff qualifications, and the training programs currently in place. A focused engagement plan around the service standards with both industry experts and the general public will take place and provide input into the overall framework for improvements. The report back in Q3 2025 to IEC will also include the results of the service quality pilot and a review of the existing service delivery model, insourcing or outsourcing, as well as recommendations on the best approach to move forward. Final point, urban forestry is transitioning to the Environment and Climate Division on January 1st, and this will allow us to continue to build on the progress and improvements we have made. That concludes our presentation, and we're happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And if you bear with me for a moment for the screen to turn over, I'll check and see. Any questions of staff on this item? Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. So in the one slide, it says you have 384 full-time employee positions. How many full-time contract positions do you utilize?
Through the chair, through forestry operations, currently approximately 80% of the work conducted is through contractors, leaving approximately 20% for staff.
So sorry, you have 384 full-time, so that's 20%?
So 384 is full-time staff across all of urban forestry. Within urban forestry operations, which is roughly a third of that, those staff represent about 20% of the work that is completed with regard to forestry operations.
So sorry, in the slide deck, you have 384 full-time employee positions. Is that city staff and contractors?
Through the chair, for clarification, the 384 full-time employee positions are city staff working in both Kim's area, policy, invasive species management, as well as forestry operation, which is Carly Hink's area, which takes care of sort of the pruning and tree removal.
Okay, so how many, sorry, I'm gonna try this again. So how many contract positions are we using?
Through the chair, I don't know if we have the number of contract staff. We would know how many contracts we have in place, which are responsible for about 80% of the work performed by urban forestry.
Okay, and then I guess I'm still trying to understand, I don't know who this goes to. So we do topping, stemming, which from the slide deck, it looks like city staff, and then stumping and planting is done by contract, according to the pictures in the slide deck. Why, and I guess I'm trying to understand why when we take a tree down on a city boulevard, for example, you wouldn't do the topping, stemming, and stumping all at the same time.
So through the chair, just for clarification, both contract and city crews undertake the different phases of work, Councillor, that you're referring to on the slide in our presentation. With regard to why we don't do topping, stemming, and stumping all on one visit, is related to a number of reasons. One is the way that our contracts are set up. It is within regard to how much different equipment would be required to take up space on a street to undertake that work, as well as just the different materials that would need to be brought to each site through start to finish of a tree being removed through to stumping.
So, and is that mandated by council that that mix is done that way?
No, the current contract configuration is a reflection of some of the Auditor General recommendations to make our contracts more accessible to the arboricultural industry, meaning that we could break up contracts by service type. Also, just related to some of the contract staff. Just having different specialties for those different types of, and equipment associated with that for those different types of service.
Okay. And then the completion rate chart, how many per, I'll give the example of tree stumping. How many calls get missed? Do you have any idea how many calls you have to go back and do? And I ask that because, for example, in my ward, throughout my ward, on almost a lot of streets, I will say, that I can walk around and see a stump on the boulevard, and I will knock on the homeowner's door and ask, you know, did you cut the tree down or what happened? And they'll say, no, the city cut the tree down. And I'll ask them, you know, to me, that's an old looking stump on your boulevard. How long ago was that done? And the common answer I get is 3 to 5 years. And I believe in your presentation, you said tree stumping was done. This chart says the service standard is 8 months. And I believe there was something referred to as 3 years. I'm trying to understand how often that service standard doesn't get met.
So through the chair, thank you, Councillor. You've definitely hit an area where urban forestry is and consistently does experience a backlog. So with regard to stumping, there are a few reasons why we were not hitting, and we have continuous improvement to do to hit service targets for stumping. A few of those reasons include changing our contract framework over the last 3 years. There could be troubles with that results in some difficulties with the scheduling as well. But moving forward and with regard to the customer service experience, we are slowly narrowing down the current service backlog, and through the 2025 budget, we're looking to catch up and minimize that backlog as much as possible to improve that response and meeting of the service standard.
So how many sites are on backlog?
Last question.
So according to the stats that I have in front of me, we currently have, as of November 5th, 2024, about 9,500 stumps to complete.
Okay,
and that
thank
is an improvement from the beginning of 2024.
Any further questions from other members of the committee? Councillor Angie, did you get everything you need?
I guess I got as best as I'm going to get. Thank you.
Okay. Any members wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will just say I will move to receive and just express my thanks for coming today and for the presentation, and also the recognition that the service delivery success has trended in such a positive manner. And I think that's a reflection of hard work, a response to the Auditor General's advice to us, and also the team effort, because it's people that are out in the field that are actually doing the work to bring those, to catch up all those service standards. So thank you. On the receipt, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Okay. SE 6.5, Transportation Services Service Excellence. We do have a presentation. I see the team coming together. We'll begin in just a moment once there's a technology turnover here.
we are.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to present today on just a couple of our service standards and some of the things we're proud of and a number of things that we are definitely in a state of continuous improvement. I'm Barbara Gray, I'm the General Manager of Transportation Services, and I'm joined today by Vince Ferrazza, who's the Director of Operations and Maintenance, and Mike Burnett, who's the Director of our Business Performance Unit. Okay, next slide. So first, a couple of nits and ticks about our agenda today. I just have a few slides, but we're going to talk a little bit about transportation services, our mission, vision, and principles. Focus on two areas of service requests that are really very frequently used and quite popular. The service requests, not the actual impacts. So that's the boulevard damage, service standards and performance related to snow, and our pothole service standards and performances. And then talk a little bit about some additional programs and service improvements that we're making. And then lastly, focus on a request that Councillor Ainsley made of us in September at this committee about inquiring whether our systems, our old system of TMMS and Maximo is seamlessly integrated or if there are issues there that need to be addressed. So our mission, vision, and principles are really rooted in moving people. So in our mission, connecting people with the places, activities, and communities they value. In our vision, it's about keeping people and communities safe while they go about their daily routines or get to special events. And then our principles of safe, healthy communities, quality service, access for everyone, and resilient solutions is around how we organize our work and try to create high-quality services that increase access for everyone. The other principle we organize our work around is on resilience. So whether that's using greener technologies or a more coordinated approach to maintaining our infrastructure, we try to get better every year in our programs and try to have resilient solutions. So we developed this mission, vision, and principles as part of the work we undertook a number of years ago now, about 7 years ago when we reorganized our division, and we used them to help provide more consistent service delivery across the city. Over the past 2 years, Transportation Services has created a working group with our partners at 311 and the Customer Experience Division to help better integrate our work and improve our overall communication and consistent service for the public. So this collaboration was really born out of the winter 2021-22 experiences and the fact that we were moving to Maximo, a new technology system for our frontline teams, and we knew that there were going to be many challenges that we thought would be made better by having constant and frequent problem-solving sessions with our partners at 311. And what we also found through these meetings was that there were a number of issues that were impacting our service delivery, and they encouraged us to do a deeper dive into our problem codes with 311 to make sure they were clear, consistent, and not duplicative. We also found upon review that not all service requests were going to the right division. So that can result in time wasted as issues get passed back and forth between divisions. For example, until this year, when people called in with an issue with a catch basin, the SR would come to Transportation Services instead of going to Toronto Water, which is the team that typically reviews, assesses, and addresses those requests. As part of this work, we also did a review of our service levels and a significant update to our knowledge base and key messages for the public. So we wanted to make sure that when a 311 customer service representative answered a call about winter services, they were sharing a clear and consistent message about what to expect from our current service. So that requires us to update the knowledge base, and we've worked to do that over the past couple of years with 311. So this collaboration has been really valuable. We continue to meet, I think it's every 2 to 3 weeks, and it's resulted in a great improvement in how we manage SRs and how we can provide a thoughtful and effective customer interaction more consistently. And it's also led to, as I mentioned, the knowledge of some things that really need to be fixed. And so we've embarked on that with real focus over the past year. And so I want to talk a little bit about that in the upcoming slides. So I'm going to do a bit of a dive into boulevard damage first and then pothole repair. So I know, councillors, that your offices get these calls as well, really all year round, but mostly after a snow event where the sidewalk plow damages the sod, the sidewalk, or other structures in the boulevard area. A few common reasons for more instances of damage to occur include when the ground is soft as a result of higher than normal winter temperatures. And then if that's the case, which certainly happened in 2023, Any variation that the plow takes from the sidewalk path can result in damage to the boulevard, to the grass and the sod. And it happens more frequently even if there's no windrow that exists from a previous storm, because many times the sidewalk plow operators go out overnight and it's very dark out, and if there's no windrow from a previous storm, it's very hard to see where the sidewalk exists. The current service level allows for nearly a year from the date a boulevard damage SR is received until the repair is to be completed, about 360 days. And most of the reason for this long timeline is that the plow damage must be addressed by the entity who caused it. So if the contractor causes the damage in your ward, councillor, then they have to fix it. And that's there, and there's a claim that's usually filed against them. Contractors do this work in the spring and the summer when the sod is available to fix the impact, and also when the sod has more likelihood of growing back normally during the warmer weather. So you may get the service request as a staffer assigned in January when the damage happens, but the resolution may happen many months later, and I know that that's been a challenge for us in trying to figure out how to sort that out. So I'm going to move on to some numbers. This chart shows the number of winter boulevard damage service requests that have been completed each year since 2020. And I want to draw your attention to 2023. I did a bit of a workup to that, right, in talking about it was an unseasonably warm year. We had a lot of plow damage service requests. And we believe this is an anomaly, and I'll tell you why. In addition to the temperature conditions in 2023, it was also the first year of our new winter contracts. So when the new vendors were learning their new beats and service areas, they didn't have familiarity, because a lot of the contractors who had done winter service before weren't necessarily doing that winter service in the same wards that they had delivered the service in previously. In some cases, they may have done different infrastructure types, so not necessarily the same as doing sidewalks. So they had to learn those new beats and service areas, and so there was an impact there. It was also the first year where our new in-house sidewalk snow clearing program was fully operational. So we had staff, our light equipment operators, who came over to operate the small sidewalk plows in many of the wards in Toronto East York, which allowed us to clear an additional 1,300 kilometers of sidewalk, but they were also new and the equipment was new, and it definitely led to more service requests that year than in other years. This chart also shows an example of a retired SR code. We stopped using the code roadside plow damage recently, as we found it to be redundant with road plow damage and very confusing to everyone, which of course causes more time when things get sorted out. The two codes made sense in previous contract iterations because we did have different contractors that were doing the road and the sidewalk, and so we had to differentiate between the two for the claims. But now that the contractor is responsible for every infrastructure in that zone, today it's no longer necessary, and so that's an example of a service, an SR code that we've eliminated. Okay, so this chart, the next one, shows the information as a percentage of SRs closed on time. 2023 also shows up here as an anomaly. This was the year where operations and maintenance transitioned from TMMS to Maximo, which led to slower lookup times and response as the staff were on a learning curve. O&M was also the first section in transportation services to be onboarded to Maximo, and multiple issues impacted reporting, including how to properly complete all of the steps required to close out a service request in the new program. Again, we have done a very focused training of staff over the last year to eliminate this issue, and we have seen a significant improvement. Also, business needs and requirements were still being developed and customized to meet our operational needs in Maximo, and this work continues today. It's a very live engagement that we have with our staff and the new technology. And until March of 2023, our winter vendors were not onboarded to Maximo. They are now, but previously they had to do all their service requests manually. They had to be transmitted manually via email from us to the contractor to be able to address that. And again, that took more time and created a bit more confusion, but now they are fully onboarded to Maximo, so they see what we see in terms of where those locations are, and they can go and address them more expeditiously. Okay. I'm going to continue on through the whole presentation. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to transition to potholes. As we've talked about before at this committee, I believe, 70% of all of our potholes are proactively repaired through our service maintenance patrols. So when our staff go out and do their required minimum maintenance patrols, they log service requests and complete them. 20% are reported by the public through 311, and the remaining 10% are work orders that are created by our maintenance team. So our field investigators patrol the roads consistent with the provincial minimum maintenance standards. For expressways, they patrol 3 times every 7 days. Arterials are 2 times every 7 days. Collectors once every 2 weeks, and the locals, they patrol once a month. The field investigators respond to 311 generated pothole service requests, as well as self-identify and create pothole work orders when they are on patrol. And in addition to the daily pothole repair, our crews also conduct pothole blitzes on weekends where they can resolve and close as many 311 generated pothole service requests as possible in a relatively short amount of time, and typically at times when there's not as much traffic congestion, so that they're able to move around the city a little easier. So next slide. Thank you. Currently, one of the things that we learned in doing sort of this deep dive, not only on our pothole program, but also with our partners at 311, is that there was really only one service standard recorded for potholes, and that was 4 days. So no matter the road classification, if it was on expressway or local road, it was a 4-day service request. That clearly hadn't been reviewed in many years. It was not consistent with what we have in the budget, which is a more varied approach to that, and also not consistent or aligned with the provincial minimum maintenance standards, which ranges from 4 to 30 days for pothole maintenance, depending on the classification of the road. So we initiated a review in early 2024, and we will be bringing a revised service standard approach through the budget process this coming year in 25, and that approach will more closely align or beat the provincial service standard. We have also been working in the back end to ensure that information in transportation, like what roads have what classifications, because that will become very important when we make this shift, is seamlessly tied into the Maximo system so that the appropriate service level can be assigned when a pothole comes in, and that we can track performance against that. So we plan to have the new system live, if all goes as planned, by third quarter of 2025. So next to the numbers. So this chart shows the pothole repair numbers by location, by year. A couple things to note here. The 2021 numbers were impacted by high staff vacancies, which went from, we had 20% frontline vacancies in 2020 to 49% at the beginning of 2023. And now with concerted effort to hire, we have a 10% vacancy rate. So I think you're going to be seeing we are certainly putting in importance on keeping our frontline positions filled because it has a direct impact on our ability to get the work done. 2021 also saw many competing priorities for frontline staff, such as the pandemic programs of Active TO, Cafe TO, and Curb TO, which reduced the amount of time spent on pothole repair. 2022 was the first full year of the refreshed 311 mobile app, which gave customers more access to easier, take a picture and send it into 311. So we saw many more pothole service requests in that year. In 2024, we changed our practices to more proactively fill potholes in equity-deserving communities who traditionally may be less comfortable contacting the city for services. And this is reflected in the lower numbers of service requests, but the higher numbers of closed potholes. So we did things more proactively in 2024 in many more neighborhoods of the city than we have previously. And then with the warmer winter in 2024, we also leveraged our in-house sidewalk snowplow operators to fill potholes in January, February, and March, which are traditionally months we don't do pothole blitzes, but we did this year. So this is the percentage of pothole service requests closed on time. This one might be a little tricky, so I assume we'll have some questions about it, but I'm going to try to make it as clear as I possibly can. So prior to 2023 and before our comprehensive pothole service review, staff were applying a different approach on when to close a service request for a pothole. They would close it when the field investigator inspected the area and made it safe, not necessarily when the pothole was fully repaired. This is because the field investigators may not have the materials or the equipment to perform a permanent repair, so before closing the SR, they would create another one for repair that went to the appropriate crew. And that second service request was assigned a completion timeline, much longer timeline of 90 days, and that contributed to the higher response rates in 2020, 2021, and 2022. So this issue was identified as part of our work with 311, and the subsequent service review is one of the reasons we're bringing a revised service standard proposal by road classification in 25. And we anticipate that our revised service standard will be somewhere between 4 and 21 days. This chart also shows the growing pains in onboarding the new Maximo system and the integration into 311 Salesforce. And there are still ongoing issues with the reporting. So for example, there's a feature in the 311 app that allows the pothole to be identified by the person who's calling it in as a priority 1 issue, so a significant safety issue. This then gets assigned a 24-hour service level response. Up to half of all the pothole service requests being logged through the app are being identified as priority 1. So that's a question of educating people about what that safety request is for, because not every pothole is a safety issue. And what I think what happens is the field investigators then go out there, they investigate those pothole requests and the safety impact, and they find that they should not be a priority 1 status, and it leads to less efficiency in them being able to plan their routes and find out that they're not emergencies when they get there. So despite these issues with reporting and many of the changes that we are now underway in making, the increase in staffing has resulted in our highest number of potholes repaired in the last 5 years. So about 254,000 as of November 12th. And also, as I mentioned, the warmer weather in 24 meant we got to do more pothole blitzes. We also took a snapshot of our SR responses between October and November of this year and found that 94% of all properly reported pothole SRs were being completed within the appropriate service timelines, which compares to those inaccurately logged as priority 1, where there was a 30% on-time response to the 24-hour timeline. So we really, in doing this deep dive on the codes and the service request standards, we've really found issues that need to be fixed, and we've gone ahead to fix them, and some of those will have to come to council for consideration as part of the budget, which we will bring in 25. Covered most of this. Training, we're doing that. We are aligning our service standards. We want to make sure that staff have a consistent and predictable method of addressing our SRs. I just wanted to also note that the impacts of traffic congestion also impact our maintenance abilities, and we've addressed this through weekend pothole blitzes, but we know that blitzes, while they are very effective, do result in increased delivery costs. And so ideally we would be able to do our work during regular hours. And finally, as I mentioned a couple of times already, the importance of keeping our frontline positions filled and making sure the competing priorities do not have an outsized impact on our important maintenance activities. Hold on here. So in terms of continuous improvement, as I mentioned, we continue to meet with this Maximo working group. We continue to get direct feedback from our frontline staff to find out when other things emerge and how we can fix them, and we're actioning those. We're cleaning up old data so that we can improve our data accuracy and making sure that the dashboard that we've created that shows SRs and has really good tools for staff to be able to understand where they are and when they need to be addressed is being used consistently. We've also created a standard operating procedure to make sure that our staff can be consistently trained and tracked delivery against that standard. One of the other things that we did this year was we analyzed where potholes were cropping up, both the ones that we found in our patrols and the ones that people were calling in. And we also noticed that people were not calling in potholes consistently across the whole city. So we started to apply an equity lens to our work and created a new dashboard to assist in, to look at all the demographics and do some pothole blitzes that were focused specifically on equity deserving communities and not just on the number of service requests. So that's been, I think, one of the contributors to our ability to get a lot more potholes filled throughout the city. We are also working on AI technology, a pilot program using iris technology that's going to be rolling out in the second and third quarter of 25. So the AI software is going to identify pavement conditions that are either potholes or leading to potholes, and it automatically create work orders for repair. The data will be cross-referenced with existing SRs, but will ultimately be much more proactive in being able to identify locations, and also the fact that they've been filled consistent with the service timeline. So we're pretty excited about that. We have a dedicated bikeway inspection program with our e-bikes that is coming online again in 22-23 to assist in identifying hazards and maintenance requirements on the road in areas where cyclists typically travel. We have 5 new modernized asphalt repair equipment, smaller ones to more efficiently serve and access downtown locations, and are also finally going to have our 2 new patch masters, which will be able to do more substantial repairs. So locations where there may be multiple potholes or some other issues that would be better served by doing a broader repair, that we can do those in-house now and have a little bit more control over that. And we're piloting the use of tablets and GPS in the field to directly enter information into Maximo. Again, all with the goal of being more efficient and giving our staff the right tools to be able to do the work as effectively as possible. Okay. So the last point I'm going to address is the request from Councillor Ainsley on September 6th of the Service Excellence Committee. He was concerned that there was a lack of full integration between 311 and Transportation Services because our former work management system, TMMS, had a different number than the Maximo work order number, and he wanted to make sure that that was consistently applied and that people weren't chasing down the rabbit hole of one number and causing more challenges and impacts to the people who are fixing the service request, and also to confuse and require the public or maybe the councillor to make multiple calls to track that was occurring, what was the sacrifice in terms of accuracy, etc. So what we found out was that they're definitely, while the 2 systems are integrated, there was more training that was required to get staff to make sure that they were aware of the search capabilities within our system using the 311 service request number. So there was definitely an impact that was occurring because of lack of consistent staff training that we have addressed. We have reminded staff that they have the ability to search the 311 Salesforce database using that 311 service request number. And as we continue to work to transition to Maximo throughout the division from TMMS, we are continuing to work closely with Customer Experience Division on these processes and system improvements between the 2 to ensure that that high quality of service for the public and council constituency offices stays consistent, but also increases and improves. So definitely there was an issue there that required some additional staff training to sort out, and we will continue to track that to make sure that people have the right tools that they need and that they are using the right numbers so that they can be as effective as possible. So with that, we will turn it over to the committee for questions, and thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you, Ms. Gray, and thank you to the team. When the screen turns over, I'll check with my colleagues. Any questions of staff? Councillor Cheng and Councillor Ainsley. So Councillor Cheng first, please.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Potholes are much needed to be fixed across our city, and I'm glad to hear so much proactivity is happening, that we're not just waiting for people to report them. I just have a question about one thing, which is the weekend blitzes. In light of the need to have these happen on a regular basis, is there any chance that we could have a weekend team so that we're not paying overtime, so that there's not a significant increase in costs in order to deliver a much needed service? Because it sounds like it's to prevent traffic congestion. We do need these weekend blitzes.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. So we've done some exploration of bringing on sort of a weekend shift, a fly squad, if you will, that would be working regular hours. And it's something that we continue to explore. What we have found is the number of one of the most effective things about a blitz is that we can have high numbers of crews out there across the whole city, which is not something we could necessarily replicate in that kind of a model where we just had people who were assigned to weekend work. But we are doing, I would say, a pretty deep dive into the overtime costs because it is certainly an impact. This year it's been both wonderful in that we've had warmer temperatures, and so we've been able to do a lot more blitzes, but we will see that it's cost us a little bit in terms of the ability to do that. So we will continue to try to not use as much overtime on the weekend blitzes, but I think the value of clearing out those service requests at a time when the streets are not that congested, because we were actually doing extended service hours on regular business days where we would have folks who work normally from 6 to 2 work again with an extended timeline from 2 to 6, and we found that they were in the rush hour timeline, so it was really inefficient for them to do the work. So anyway, we will definitely take that back.
Because it sounds like if you had, and this is just a random number, 20 teams out on a blitz, then even just having 1 or 2 weekend teams that just consistently every weekend are doing work could potentially achieve similar impact as a blitz, just a stable weekend team.
Yeah, we will take a look at that and see what numbers would make sense in terms of productivity numbers. We do have overnight teams, and we definitely have people who call in overnight on the weekends. We have people available to do emergency work and all of that. But you're right, we don't have a regular staffed crew to do pothole work on the weekend.
Great, thanks. That's all my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. And Barbara, first off, I want to thank you for the work in integrating the 311 with your internal system. I know that my constituency staff in particular appreciate it, so thank you very much. I did want to ask about damage from sidewalk snowplows on residence boulevards. Did I hear you correctly from the date that we file a complaint or with 311? The contractor has 360 days to repair the damage?
That's correct. It doesn't usually take that long, Councillor, but that's the service standard.
Okay. My understanding, the service standard was June or July at the latest. When did that change?
Through the chair, that change was implemented in 2023. So as Barbara indicated, the vast majority of all of the service requests related to plow damage to a boulevard, to sods, are repaired by the end of the summer. So while there is a 360-day service level that was implemented in 2023, they are essentially all completed before the next winter season.
So can something be sent to our constituency office staff? Because my staff, for example, and I will include myself, I thought it was the end of June.
No.
I even had a town hall meeting this past Monday where people asked about boulevard damage of both my staff and both my constituency staff and we were under the impression it's June.
Councillor, we will absolutely send that. The presentation that Vince just did, the sort of winter kickoff, I think identified that, so we'll send that, and we're happy to follow up with your staff with any questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to follow up on pothole filling.
Yep.
I missed part of your explanation around there was concerns with technology and procedures. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes. So, technology and procedures. So we onboarded Maximo, and when there was not consistent. So a couple of things. There was a consistent 4-day service request completion timeline across the board that was in the knowledge base at 311, which was not consistent with how we actually fill potholes or what's in our the back area of the budget that talks about our service standards. which was based on road classification. So we are formally updating that to better align with the provincial minimum maintenance standards, and you'll see that through the budget this year. We'll bring that through the budget this year for councillors' consideration. The other piece of it is there was inconsistent approaches to how the field investigators were closing out a service request. So previously, they would get a service request, they would go to the area to assess it and make it safe, and then they would close that service request and create another one to fill it. That would be another timeline, 90 days to fill it. And so we believe that's why the numbers that you see in these charts for 2021 and 22 are as promising as they are, very high numbers, because it was a longer timeline to complete that second service request. What we aim to do in 2025 is has a very clear service request timeline by street classification, train our staff consistently that this is what that means, and when you get to the site, it has to be closed in 4 days, meaning the pothole needs to be filled in 4 days on an expressway or an arterial, or if it's on a local road, whatever that timeline is, not just to assess it, but it actually has to be filled by that time. And I think with that training, we will then start to see much more consistent results in our numbers, and we'll be able to track performance against those numbers. Whereas right now, we've got, or previously, because we've now identified it and we're moving in that direction, but previously, it was a much longer timeline. So I don't believe those are great numbers to rely on. And the other piece of it was...
Step by step.
Yeah.
If I may, yes. So the previous work order management system, TMMS, and the new system, Maximo, are completely different on how to complete a service request once you do the work. And what we have found is that staff needed considerable training on Maximo on how to properly execute the number of steps in order to complete the service request. And if a staff member either mistakenly did not follow the series of steps, the SR would not be completed. So we have found that because of the two work order management systems are technologically much different from each other, that staff did require a significant amount of training on how to properly ensure that all the work is submitted into Maximo and that staff submit based on following a series of steps. Once that's done, the SR can be completed. We are very confident that we have now, in fact, trained our staff appropriately. And I think, as Barbara said, we looked at October and November, and for all the potholes that had the appropriate service requests, 94% of those potholes were repaired on time. And a lot of that has to be with also our staff now know how to properly complete a service request within Maximo.
And we'll keep tracking those numbers, Councillor, because we think it's really important that people can rely on the service.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, members wishing to speak?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I have 2 more questions.
Okay. Go ahead, second round, Councillor Ainsley.
Thank you. Thank you, through Mr. Chair. So sorry, the default 311 level of service for 4 days, was that established by Transportation Services or 311?
So that 4-day service level was applied by Transportation years ago. As Barbara indicated, in our review, we've come to the determination that there are some service levels that do need to be updated and improved. So that service level was established and submitted to 311.
But we've always had a more nuanced response as a standard operating procedure, but what was in the knowledge base in 311 was 4 days.
Right.
So there was definitely an inconsistency between what was being communicated to the public and what was the standard operating procedure for transportation. And when we did an examination of how that aligned even with the provincial minimum maintenance standards, our application was much closer, certainly, than the 4 days. But the 4 days does exist. It exists on expressways and arterial roads, and we will likely keep that standard because that's what the minimum maintenance standard is at the province as well.
Okay, and then my last question that I'm trying to understand, and I think you alluded to it earlier, is that someone will report a pothole, they get an SRO number, and then somebody on your transportation services staff goes out and paints an orange ring around it. It doesn't get filled immediately. And then somebody else will drive over it, damage their vehicle. And when they try to file with the city's insurance company, they get a response back that the city staff were aware of that pothole, that putting that orange ring around it negates any liability on behalf of the city for the damage to the vehicle that the person experienced after the orange ring was put around it.
I think that would, so what you describe about the staff going out, the field investigators going out and assessing the location and maybe putting an orange ring around it, that part I would agree with. I would have to refer to insurance and risk management in terms of what that results in with regard to legal liability. I don't know if anybody here knows the answer to that question. Yeah, but I think that would be.
But I guess I'm just trying to understand that. So I'm going to use myself for example. If I use the 311 app and submit a pothole concern with the attached photo, and transportation services staff should know there's a pothole there. They know exactly what it looks like, why you would still send staff out and paint an orange ring around it, and why you wouldn't just send somebody out to fill a pothole.
Well, so certainly our practice has been, even before the 311 app, where now you can have the picture of it, was that you would go out and assess it, and if it was an emergency situation, you would call it in immediately and have it fixed, and if it was one that was not a safety issue, you would mark it and create a service request for completion. So you don't like that system. I don't like that system either. And so now that we have better technology, and again, as we're working with AI to be much more proactive about identifying these locations, we want to significantly reduce the amount of time it takes to address them. And that 90-day timeline that was assigned after the initial assessment by the field investigators is too long of a timeline, even though most of them likely got filled way in advance of that timeline. I don't think it sets out a predictable and consistent path and I think that's what people should expect from us and what we should deliver.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I think we've exhausted the questions. Any members wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will just express my thanks for coming to the committee today. I will move receipt of the presentation and congratulate you on last year. I think you were at almost 250,000 potholes. And I'm sure that will continue to grow. So once again, thanks you for your presentation to the committee today. All right. Our last item is, I'm sorry, thank you, Mr. Clerk. Moving receipt of the item, all those in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Our final item is SE 6.6, which is a briefing note on the referral of item 2024.SE 5.2. Are there any questions of staff? Seeing none, any members wishing to speak? Seeing none, I will move receipt of this report for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? And that is carried. Mr. Clerk, confirming that as our last item of business, my express thanks to the members of the committee, to all of the individuals that made presentations today, and all the rest of the people in the room. Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone. Meeting adjourned.